What's the latest situation in Mexico and which control what territory across our border? In this video, I'm going to give you guys all a brief explanation of the territorial control that each cartel has, and I'm going to leverage a phenomenal tool and a phenomenal map made by a friend of mine called Active Cartel Map in Mexico. This, in my opinion, is the best map out there that depicts all the groups active in Mexico, and I'll ensure to give the link in the description below. Starting in Mexico, we can see there's a lot of territories that are having different colors, and I think it's important to highlight that there's various cartels active in Mexico that control various aspects of the territories here. Starting in the northeast, in Tamaulipas, we have two factions that formerly belonged to the Gulf Cartel that are now in active civil war, although recently in February of this year, they reached a ceasefire, and that being the group highlighted here, the Matamoros faction of the Gulf Cartel, better known as Grupo Escorpión, and the Metros out of Reynosa, Tamaulipas, that also used to belong to the Gulf Cartel, although it's important to highlight that this specific faction, the Metros, are considered to be CG&G by the U.S. Treasury Department per a recently released sanction list, in which the Treasury Department says, hey, look, the Metros are not a faction of the Gulf Cartel, but they are CG&G in Mexico. They're a key pusher of CG&G product across into the United States, and it's important to highlight them. The Metros, although have a ceasefire with Grupo Escorpión right now, they do have another important alliance with the old school Zetas or Zetas Viejas Escuelas that controls this small region in Tamaulipas, specifically a city called San Fernando, Tamaulipas. Old school Zetas and Metros, as I mentioned earlier, had an important alliance, and historically they would fight against their rival, the Scorpion Group, although right now the situation is pretty calm with the ceasefire. Zooming out a little bit and going other areas of Tamaulipas and in Nuevo León, we have CDN, or the Northeast Cartel, based out of Nuevo Laredo, Tamaulipas, which borders Laredo, Texas. CDN has a significant amount of territorial control, not only in Tamaulipas, but also in Nuevo León and in Coahuila. CDN is in an active conflict against Los Metros along the border regions of Tamaulipas and Nuevo León, as seen here. Going west, another group that's very active is La Línea, or the Nuevo Cartel de Juárez, or further known just as the Juárez Cartel. They basically control almost the entirety of Chihuahua and are very active out of Ciudad Juárez, which borders El Paso, Texas. If you see here on the purple, we have the Mayito Flacos, which is one of the factions of the Sinaloa cartel. They have a small territorial control over Chihuahua, specifically battling La Niña for the control of Ojinagua, but they have control of much more around the territory, as you see in the map, specifically around Durango and certain areas in southern Sinaloa where they're battling Los Chapitos, which is another faction of the Sinaloa cartel. As mentioned, Los Chapitos here is one of the factions of the Sinaloa cartel actively fighting against Mayito Flaco. They control territories around Sinaloa and Baja California Sur, and not only are they fighting Los Mayito Flacos, as shown here, but they're also fighting against El Beltrán Levine organization, or Cartel de Guasave, which is basically led by Chapo Isidro. Chapo Isidro is suspected to have a very solid alliance with Los Mayito Flacos, fighting against Los Chapitos. As I mentioned in my previous videos, Los Chapitos have an alliance with the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, as seen here. The Jalisco Generation Cartel, without a doubt, is probably right now the most powerful cartel in Mexico, based out of Jalisco, but they also have territorial control over Nayarit, Guanajuato, and Zacatecas, and other areas of Mexico. In Zacatecas, CG&G is in active conflict with Los Mayito Flacos, as shown here, and CG&G has sent fighters over to Sinaloa to support Los Chapitos. In Colima, there used to be a significant territorial control of CG&G, although a couple of groups from CG&G broke off and formed their own groups, and there was other rivals there. So there's an active conflict zone right now in Colima between various independent groups and breakaway factions of CG&G in that state. Going down to Michoacan, which is another area where we see a lot of CG&G activity and offensives, they're fighting various cartels there across Michoacan. CG&G is rumored to have now an alliance with the Viagras cartels, which used to be a rival, and now they have an alliance with him, fighting for control over Michoacan against a group called also the United Cartels. Now, the United Cartels is a loosely organized group of various cartels. For example, the Knights Templars was one of them, even historically the Viagras, that would fight against CG&G. Although on paper, the Carteles Unidos still exists, specifically a group within it called R5 around Los Reyes, Michoacán. For the most part, a lot of these groups fight under their own banner. And Carteles Unidos violent fighting against Michoacán is not going so well. CG&G has the upper hand over Michoacán. If we zoom out a little bit further, we have Guanajuato, again, mostly under the control of CG&G, but there's another important group based out of here called the Santa Rosa de Lima Cartel. This is a very violent group that is active in Guanajuato and is very known for their violence and mass shootings and terror campaigns against the civilian population. So Santa Rosa de Lima Cartel and Guanajuato are active and fighting there as well. Going here, this is just another example of the disputed territory. One of the groups also very active in Michoacán and in Guanajuato is La Nueva Familia Michoacana, or La Familia Michoacana, as highlighted here. La Familia Michoacana is also very active in Mexico City and in the state of Mexico, and La Nueva Familia Michoacana is also involved in a very violent conflict against CG&G in Michoacán. But separate from that, if we go down to Guerrero, as shown here, we have various groups active there as Los Guerreros Unidos and Los Telacos. It's important to highlight, as shown here, that La Familia Michoacana is fighting against Los Telacos for control over Guerrero. And that is also an area where we see a lot of times where La Nueva Familia Michoacana utilizes drones and drops explosive devices along the area. If we zoom out kind of further east, you can see areas such as Puebla, which is pretty much under the control of CG&G, and other areas east of it. If we keep on going further east, we see another important area being Tabasco, which again is under the control of CG&G, which they kind of have a front group called the Cartel Tabasco de Nueva Generación, but for all intents and purposes, that's just a front of CG&G active right now. CG&G again showing their activity, but one of the areas of Tabasco where they're fighting actively against CG&G would be La Barredora. La Barredora is also active in Tabasco and is engaged in a heavy conflict against CG&G for control of that state. Further down in Chiapas, though, this is another major conflict between CG&G and Los Mayitos Flacos for the control of the state and the smuggling routes between Guatemala into Chiapas. Both CG&G and Los Mayitos Flacos are very active in fighting in that region. One of the front groups that CG&G has active in Chiapas is called El Cartel de Chiapas y Guatemala. That is basically another front of CG&G, similar to the example that I've shown here of the Tabasco example, the Cartel de Tabasco de Nueva Generación. That's a front no different than El Cartel de Chiapas y Guatemala. That is a CG&G front. Going over to Quintana Roo and Yucatan, as you can see, we have Chapitos, Mayito Flaco, and more CG&G active in the area. Zooming out and going back up to the north, in Sonora, we have a very new cartel active within the last couple of years. This is a loose organization called the Cartel Independiente de Sonora. These are various groups that broke away from Los Chapitos around 2023 and actively fought at them. Los Cartel Independiente de Sonora is basically at best a confederation, loosely organized groups that is formed by Los Salazars, Los Paredes, y Los Cazadores, also known as Fantasmas. They're very actively fighting against Los Chapitos and remnants of Los Chapitos in the state, specifically Los Delta Pelones, which is a sub-faction of Los Chapitos, but they're very active there. As you can see, we have other Mayito Flaco presence there, but one specific group I'd like to focus on is San Luis Rio de Colorado, which is another area where the Mayito Flacos have territory. One of the factions very active here in the heartland of Los Rusos, which is a subgroup of Los Mayito Flacos. They're based out of San Luis Rio, Colorado. Going into Tijuana, obviously this is another area with a lot of various different groups. In Tijuana, we kind of see the remnants of El Cartel de Arellano Felix organization, or the Tijuana Cartel, AFO. This is a historical group that a lot of people thought was defunct, but they have some activity and life back, and they are very active in Tijuana, but the territorial control they have is very small. However, they do control very important smuggling routes into Southern California, making their influence a lot more powerful than even the territorial size would show. So, Cartel de Arellano de Felix, or the Arellano Felix organization, is still active, still in Tijuana, and still engaged in violent conflict, specifically against los Maito Flacos and La Chapiza, or Los Chapitos. So that's why we see a lot of the violence in Tijuana. Again, this is a quick video that I wanted to make, kind of highlighting everything for all my followers here and anybody who sees it. The map here kind of shows the very complex nature of Mexico and the different groups. This was just a quick overview, a quick rundown. Like I said, special thanks to Active Cartel Map in Mexico for this map. I think this is the best map out there. Other people that I like to highlight for the work that they do in ensuring that this map is up to date is the team from Geo-Confirmed Cartel. A lot of the territorial controls that is used here by Active Cartel Map, he grabs from Geo-Confirmed Cartel, and that is an excellent tool. I'll make sure to share it in the description as well. But basically, as much and all the footages of Mexico with cartels that are geolocated is uploaded there. And it's a great team of people that do a lot of work to geolocate cartel footage there, specifically Natsec Boogie or Pernicious Propaganda, Jalipon, and Latan Obscuro. They do phenomenal work geolocating videos and photos of cartel activity in Mexico that then is utilized to update this map. The beauty of this map is that it's live and constantly updated and really goes to the details. I removed a lot of the legends and features that are here. It's much more expensive than this, and I recommend everybody to look at this map, look at Geo-Confirmed Cartel to really get an understanding of the latest developments in Mexico. Please let me know what you think in the comments. I know this was a quick video. It's the first time I'm doing it. If I did a terrible job, please let me know. If you think I did great, also. And give me ideas what you would like the next video to be. Do you want me to focus on these types of things, going probably slower, more in detail by each cartel, or do you want me to focus on other areas? I'm always happy to listen to recommendations. Preston Seward really pushed me hard to start doing this, so I decided to give it a shot. So please let me know, and thank you so much for your time for today.